Welcome to Restoria, your cozy corner for gentle bedtime stories. My name is James and I'll be your host tonight. Every night, we bring you peaceful tales designed to calm your mind and help you drift off into a deep, restful sleep. So snuggle in, close your eyes, and let the story begin. The story tonight is called The Windowless Theater. Chapter 1. The Door Without a Sign. It was the kind of evening that pressed gently against the skin fog hanging in soft folds, lamplight catching in puddles, and the scent of warm bread drifting from a bakery down the street. Remy wasn't walking anywhere in particular. They were just walking, letting the sound of their footsteps on the wet cobblestones keep time. They passed shuttered shops and quiet flats, the windows aglow with the kind of amber light that made everything feel far away and safe. The street curved slightly, lined with wrought iron lamps and ivy climbing the corners of old buildings. Just ahead, nestled between two sleepy bookshops, one selling stories, the other selling silence, was a door Remy had never seen before. It was made of dark wood, worn smooth with age. No sign above it, no plaque. Just a round brass handle and a faint trace of lavender in the air. Remy might have walked past it, but a sound of breath, maybe caught in their ear, like the hush of a curtain being drawn. They stopped. The door creaked open just slightly, as if it had been waiting, and before they knew why or what or who, Remy stepped inside. The air shifted. Warmth wrapped around them like velvet. The scent of lavender deepened, mingling with candle wax and old wood. The light was low and golden, flickering from lanterns hung at even intervals. Plush carpeting softened their footsteps. No one greeted them, but somehow they felt welcome. Ahead was a small theater lobby, quiet, almost still, with deep red curtains and a single usher in black, holding out a small folded card. Remy took it. Their name wasn't written on it. Nothing was. The usher smiled with her eyes and gestured to the double doors. A second usher, just as quiet, opened them with care. Inside, the theater glowed. Rows of velvet seats curved gently toward the stage. Every seat was filled, but no one spoke. People sat as if already dreaming, some with eyes half-lidded, some with hands folded like prayers. Remy took the last open seat near the back, beside a woman with silver hair and a boy who clutched a stuffed bear. The theater hummed not with sound, but with waiting. Then the lanterns dimmed. The stage brightened just slightly, and the curtain shimmered as it rose. No actors stepped forward. No words were spoken. Instead, the shadows began. At first, they moved slowly, waves curling over each other, a bird gliding just above them. The colors behind shifted, deep blues and soft violets, like the last light of evening stretched thin. The bird split into two, then 3, then a flock. Remy leaned forward. There were no clear shapes, not really. Only suggestions. A dance of silhouettes and light, moving in a rhythm that didn't ask to be followed. Somewhere in the flicker of a hand brushing another, Remy saw a memory. The way their mother used to tuck a strand of hair behind their ear. In the shape of a hill and a rising moon, they remembered the walk home from school. Boots too big, breath clouding in the cold. They didn't cry, but they did soften. As the shadows shifted again, dancers now, spinning slowly across a field of golden light, Remy felt their breath deepen. A knot inside them began to loosen. Not all at once, but enough. The play unfolded without needing a single word. And Remy, who had not come looking for a story, found that one had been waiting for them all along. When the curtain finally fell, the room remained still for a long, long moment. No one clapped, not because it wasn't beautiful, but because it already knew it was. People rose slowly, silently, each carrying something they hadn't arrived with. Remy stood last, their limbs light, their hearts slower. The ushers held the doors open again. Fog curled into the lobby, cool and sweet. The night outside hadn't changed, but Remy had. They stepped out quietly, pulling their coat a little tighter. The door clicked shut behind them, and when they looked back, it was just a wall. But inside, the flicker of shadow and light still danced. And as they walked home, the city's hush felt like it was humming just for them. Chapter 2. The Night After. Remy slept without dreaming. Or maybe they dreamed in ways they couldn't remember. Soft flickers, feelings more than thoughts, like light moving behind closed eyes. When morning came, it arrived slow and pale, filtered through sheer curtains that swayed slightly with the breeze from the cracked window. The street outside was quiet. Remy sat at their little kitchen table with a cup of tea, fingers wrapped around the warmth, watching dust drift through sunbeams. The world felt the same, and yet something in them had shifted, subtle but undeniable. Like they'd slept beneath a deeper kind of silence. They didn't tell anyone about the theater, not because they didn't want to, but because it didn't feel like something that needed explaining. It had happened. It had settled. It didn't ask to be remembered, only carried. That evening, as twilight softened, the corners of buildings and windows began to glow again. Remy found themselves walking. Not on purpose, just following the hum in their chest. They passed the bakery. The warm scent was the same. They passed the 2 bookshops, the signs still sleepy, the windows fogged slightly with warmth. And then they saw it. The door. right where it had been. Still with no sign, still dark wood, still waiting. Without a second thought, Remy stepped forward and turned the handle. Inside, everything was just as it had been. The hush, the golden lanterns, the faint scent of lavender and old stories. This time, the usher didn't offer a card. They simply looked at Remy, nodded once, and opened the door. The theater was half full now. Different people, a different feeling. Remy took a seat closer to the middle this time. The velvet was cool beneath their fingertips. They leaned back, breath steadying. The lights dimmed. The curtain rose. Tonight, the shadows moved differently. More space between them, more stillness. They stretched, arched, then paused. The light behind them glowed amber and rose, like firelight on a winter wall. A figure emerged, a silhouette with no face, no features. But something in its posture felt familiar. It turned slowly, held out its arms. Another shape joined it, smaller, brighter. They moved together, not dancing, drifting. Remy's chest ached, gently. A memory stirred. A song their father used to hum. A night they'd once spent lying under stars, speaking only in glances. They closed their eyes, then opened them again. The stage was a forest now. Tall shadows, a light that filtered like moonlight through trees. A child running not frightened, but chasing something. Remy wasn't sure what they were seeing anymore. Only that it felt right. The show faded slowly, like the end of a dream that doesn't want to end. When the final flicker of light dimmed and the curtain fell, the room held its silence longer this time. A breath drawn together, then slowly released. No applause, only presence. Outside, fog had begun to gather again. Thicker tonight, swirling low over the cobblestones. Remy walked home slowly, coat unbuttoned, hands tucked into their pockets. The world didn't look different, but Remy did. Not to anyone else, not in any way that could be named. Only in the way you carry something precious and quiet, deep in the middle of yourself. Something that flickers and stays. Chapter 3, Shadows Within. It didn't take long before the theater became a part of Remy's life, as quiet and steady as their morning cup of tea. They never planned their visits, they simply arrived. On nights when the city felt too sharp, or their thoughts too loud, they'd find themselves drifting back to the winding street between the bookshops, and there it would be. The door, the hush, the flicker of something wordless waiting. Each time, the usher met their eyes with a nod. No card, no words, just understanding. The plays remained unspoken, but never the same. One night, the stage bloomed into shadowy tree stall, swaying with leaves like drifting ink. A single figure wandered through them, lantern in hand, casting light that didn't quite reach the ground. Every few steps, the light flickered, and the trees leaned closer, listening. Remy watched, breath caught somewhere deep. They remembered walking alone once, as a child, down a long hallway in a quiet house, hoping someone would call out for them. No one did, but they remembered the warmth of the hallway light, how it had waited. Another evening, the entire show was made of window-shadowy rectangles floating in darkness. Inside each, flickers of movement. A bird, a hand, someone dancing alone. Remy found themselves blinking back tears without knowing why. Maybe it was the way the windows stayed lit long after the figures disappeared. That night, they walked home slower than usual, the fog curling like ribbon around their legs. They felt as if something inside them had shifted, slightly tilted towards softness. And then came the performance that stayed with them the longest. It was a quiet Wednesday. Rain tapped gently on the street outside as Remy entered the theater. Only a few people were there. The hush was deeper than usual, almost solemn. They took a seat in the second row. The curtain lifted. The stage was empty. No movement. No light. Just stillness. Then, very slowly, a single beam glowed down. In its center, a chair. A shadow sat there, upright, waiting. Remy watched. For minutes, nothing changed. But they couldn't look away. Eventually, the figure raised a hand. Another light blinked on. Another chair. Empty. The shadow turned toward it, reached, then rested its hand on its own knee again. That was all. Remy felt their heart ache not in sadness, but recognition. How many times had they reached for connection and chosen stillness instead? How often had they waited too? When the curtain finally fell, the quiet in the room wasn't heavy. It was reverent. Outside, the rain had stopped. The street glistened, and in a nearby window, a cat watched the world like it had secrets to keep. Remy went home and sat at their desk. They lit a candle, opened their journal, wrote only this: some stories don't need to be told, they just need to be felt. Then they closed the book, blew out the candle, and let the shadows stay. Chapter 4: The Quiet Between Shows. For a while, Remy didn't return. Not because they didn't want to, but because something had settled. The kind of quiet that comes after a good cry or the last note of a lullaby. A silence full of meaning, not absence. The theater waited. Remy knew that. They could feel it in the soft hush of twilight, in the way lamplight pooled gently on the cobblestones. The door would be there when needed. It always was. In the meantime, Remy found themselves slowing down. They woke earlier, let the kettle boil longer, watched steam curl from mugs as if it might spell something. They walked slower through the market, paused longer at crosswalks, let their fingers brush spines in the bookshop next to the theater, even when they weren't looking for anything in particular. At night, dreams returned. Nothing dramatic, just flickers, shadows stretching long across walls, light flickering behind curtains, familiar but softer now. One evening, while sipping tea on the windowsill, Remy watched fog roll in over the city roofs. It moved like the curtain at the end of a show, gentle, final, full of grace. They thought of the shadow in the chair, how it had reached, how it had waited. Something inside Remy stirred, not restlessness, readiness. They pulled on their coat. The city didn't seem to notice them walking, but a cat curled on a stoop blinked slowly as they passed, and the bookstore window glowed just a bit warmer. The door was there. Of course it was. This time, the usher met them not with a nod, but with a faint smile. Still no words, still no ticket. Inside, the theater was nearly empty. Remy took a seat near the center. The lights dimmed. No curtain rose. Instead, the shadows began directly on the walls, flowing across the theater like painted wind. Silhouettes of leaves, birds, windows swinging open. Then, a figure walking, steady and slow, carrying nothing. They passed through a field, a city, a tunnel of trees. Always alone, never hurried. Remy watched, still. The figure sat on a bench, waited, then stood again. There was no arrival, only motion, only being. And that, Remy understood, was the whole point. When the theater dimmed to black, it didn't feel like an ending, just a pause. A held breath before the next note. They walked home in silence, heart wrapped in something soft and unseen. And as they fell asleep that night, they didn't dream in shadows or flickers. They dreamed in stillness, and woke rested. Chapter 5. A familiar shape. The next time Remy returned to the theater, the air had changed. It was colder now winter, brushing the edges of the city, slipping fingers of frost along windows and catching breath in quiet clouds. The streets were lit early, golden halos hovering in the dusk. People walked faster, heads tucked down, scarves pulled high. But not Remy. They moved slowly, the way someone does when they know where they're going, even if they don't know why. The door was there, as always. This time, the usher offered them something small, a folded scrap of paper. Remy opened it once they were seated. No words, just a simple line drawing. A figure standing in a doorway. The lanterns dimmed. The curtain lifted. And for the first time, Remy felt like the shadows were looking back. The stage began in darkness. Then, a flicker like a memory lighting from within. A window opened. A silhouette leaned out, then turned and walked through a narrow hallway, pausing beside framed shapes photos maybe, or mirrors. Their outlines were blurred, but one of them looked familiar. Remy leaned forward. The figure stopped, as if listening, then stepped off the path. They walked into a garden of shadowed flowers blooming in slow motion, petals rising rather than falling. And there, beneath a flickering tree, sat a second figure. The two simply sat, side by side, facing the same direction. No reaching, no turning, just presence. And something in Remy's chest eased. There had been a time, long ago, when they'd sat like that with someone they loved, not needing to speak, not needing to name it, just letting the moment be enough. The play moved on. The figures rose, parted. The shadows grew longer. The light shifted. And for the briefest second, Remy saw their own outline reflected in the glass of the lantern beside the stage. They blinked. It was gone. But the feeling stayed. When the curtain fell, there was no applause, only a soft rustle, like a sigh. Outside, snow had begun to fall. Thick, quiet flakes that softened the world into stillness. Remy walked home with the drawing in their coat pocket. When they reached their flat, they placed it gently on the table, beside the candle, beside the journal. They didn't write anything that night. They didn't need to. Some evenings aren't for answers. Some are for recognition, for feeling seen by something that doesn't ask who you are, only that you are here. And that, tonight, is enough. Chapter 6. The Mirror Play. Snow still lay soft on the rooftops, but the city had settled into its winter rhythm. Quiet mornings, slow evenings, the hum of kettles and boots drying by the door. Remy hadn't returned to the theater in over a week, but the memory of it lingered in the corners of their thoughts like a lantern glow that never fully faded. They'd begun dreaming in layers again, not vivid, not clear, just feelings. A pull, a door, a place just beyond the edge of waking. And with each dream, the desire to return grew a little stronger. That night, without planning to, they put on their coat and stepped outside. The streets were nearly empty. Even the cafes had gone quiet. The bookshop windows were dark. The air smelled like snow and chimney smoke. The door was waiting. The usher gave a nod and opened it without a word. Inside, the theater was completely full. Remy hesitated, but somehow, a single seat remained center row near the front. As they sat, they felt a strange hum in their chest, like anticipation or memory. The lights dimmed. The curtain rose. What filled the stage was nothing. For a moment, then a figure, a mirror. The figure stood before it, unmoving. Behind them, shadows flickered scenes from places Remy didn't recognize and yet knew. A train window, a pair of hands wringing a scarf, a room with books stacked like walls. The figure in the mirror began to move, but not the one standing before it. The reflection danced first. It reached. It knelt. It curled inward. Then the figure followed one beat behind, as though remembering how to be what it once was. Remy's breath caught, because in that moment, the reflection became familiar. Not in form, but in movement. The way it tilted its head, the way it held stillness in its hands, the way it looked out. It moved like someone learning to forgive. The shadows behind the mirror slowed, then faded. The reflection and the figure became one, and stood quietly together. The play ended not with a fall of the curtain, but a dimming of the light, as though someone had closed their eyes. When Remy stepped outside, the city was hushed in a way that made them want to whisper. They walked slowly home. Inside, they lit a candle and sat before the mirror above their dresser. For a long time, they didn't look away. Then, finally, they smiled. Not because anything had changed, but because they had seen themselves clearly and stayed. Chapter 7. The Light That Stayed. Spring came slowly. The snow melted in patches, curling back into the earth. Trees budded quietly, as though asking permission. The city exhaled. Window panes opened, scarves loosened, and in the warm hush of evening, twilight lingered a little longer. Remy hadn't visited the theater in some Timano out of forgetting, but out of fullness. They no longer felt the urgency they once had. The quiet was still with them, woven into their days like thread. But one evening, as birds circled the rooftops and petals swirled in the street, they felt the pull again. This time, it felt like saying goodbye. They walked with their hands in their coat pockets, not thinking, just feeling. The door was there. Of course it was. The usher opened it without nod or smile, just presence. Like always, inside, the theater glowed warmer than before. Not brighter, just deeper, more whole. The audience was small, familiar faces. The silver-haired woman, the boy with the stuffed bear, now slightly older, a man with kind eyes who always sat in the back row. Remy took a seat near the center, heart soft. The curtain rose. This time, there were no shadows, only light. It poured from behind the stage, golden and slow, bending and stretching like a horizon just before dawn. Figures appeared not distinct, just motion and warmth, a swirl of connection, a touch, a pause, then another. There was no story to follow, no memory to stir. Only the deep ache of being seen. Remy closed their eyes and saw everything. The hallway of their childhood. The empty chair. The window with the cat. The reflection in the mirror. All of it held in the light. And none of it demanding. Just there. When they opened their eyes, the stage was empty, but the light remained. Even as the lanterns rose and the audience quietly stood to leave, the warmth stayed. Remy remained in their seat for one more breath. Then they stood, walked out. The usher closed the door behind them, and for the first time, Remy didn't look back. They didn't need to, because the hush was with them now. The shadows, the flicker, the quiet seeing. It had all stayed. That night, at home, they lit a single candle, sat at their desk, and wrote. Some doors are never really closed. They folded the paper, tucked it between the pages of a book, and as they slept, the world outside held steady, not silent, but deeply, beautifully still. Just like the theater that waited between two bookshops for the next soul ready to feel, not hear, a story.